You're a weight on our shoulders, Mom. Just leave. My daughter Clara shrieked the words, clutching a lottery ticket she believed was worth a staggering $30 million. Her husband, Mark, let out a chuckle as he shoved me toward the door of the very house I had financed with my life savings. I simply offered a small, knowing smile. Clara, my dear, I asked gently, are you certain you've read the name printed on that ticket? When they finally focused on the fine print, their triumphant faces contorted into masks of horror, and they began to scream and clutch at their hair in utter despair. The utility bills were scattered across the coffee table, each one a silent accusation. Clara's palm slammed down next to them, making the power bill skitter towards the worn fabric of my armchair. Just look at this. Her voice sliced through the quiet of the afternoon. $300 for electricity, $250 for gas, and I haven't even bought groceries yet. Mark, her husband, barely shifted on the sofa, his eyes glued to the television where some daytime talk show was playing. A wave of canned laughter from the TV audience seemed to punctuate our grim family moment. The irony was almost too much to bear. Your pitiful $1,200 doesn't even make a dent in the grocery bill anymore. Clara seethed, turning on me, her face a blotchy red with fury. We are sinking here, Mom, and you just sit there, as if everything is perfectly fine. I calmly folded my hands in my lap, my gaze following her as she paced furiously between the kitchen doorway and the coffee table. This had been our reality for 3 years. 3 long years since I had given them everything I had. The pension pays what it pays, I stated, my voice low but firm. Perhaps if one of you were to finally secure a job. The words lingered in the tense air like a foul odor. Mark's head whipped in my direction, his expression hardening. The talk show host's cheerful voice suddenly seemed intrusive in the heavy silence. Are you suggesting I'm some kind of failure? Mark's tone had a threatening undercurrent that I had come to know all too well. He heaved himself into a sitting position on the couch, no longer relaxed. I've been searching for a position. The market for sales managers has been awful for 2 years. The question left my lips before I could stop myself. 2 years? Clara let out a laugh that was sharp and devoid of any humor. Oh, right. Mark is the problem. Not the fact that your Social Security check is barely enough to cover the cost of keeping the lights on. She gestured wildly at the bills on the table. We need real money, not the pocket change from some factory pension. The coffee table that separated us felt as wide as a chasm. The bills, the numbers, they were more than just monthly debts. They were the tangible proof of promises shattered, of sacrifices I had made that were now completely forgotten and unappreciated. I gave 37 years of my life to that factory, I said, my voice unwavering despite the anger simmering inside me. That pension provided for your father and me without any trouble. Well, Dad isn't here anymore, is he? Clara's retort was a cruel slap. And your little pension certainly doesn't stretch to support 3 people. Mark was on his feet now, his large frame casting an imposing shadow over the room. Maybe you should have considered that before you decided to move in with us. His words twisted the truth, painting me as an intruder who had forced her way into their lives, rather than the invited guest I was. The sound of the laugh track on the television felt like it was mocking our entire situation. If I recall correctly, I was asked to move in, I said, choosing my words with care, right after I sold my house and provided you with the down payment for this one. That was a different situation, Clara said, waving her hand dismissively as if batting away a fly. That was 3 years ago. Times change. 3 years. Had it truly been that long since I had signed over a check for $150,000? Since Clara had wrapped me in a tight hug and promised me that I would always have a place with them? Yes, times do change, I conceded. But my contribution hasn't. Mark took a step closer to my chair. Look, old woman, we appreciate what you did for us back then, but that doesn't entitle you to free room and board for the rest of your life. The phrase stung more than I expected. Free room and board. It was as if my pension, my contributions to the groceries, and my help with the bills were utterly worthless to them. I'm not asking for anything for free, I replied. I am paying my share. Your share? Clara's voice rose in pitch. Your share would be to split everything 3 ways. Your share would be an $800 rent payment, not the zero you're paying now. The math was a deliberate, calculated cruelty. $800 would leave me with only $400 from my pension. $400 a month to pay for my food, clothes, medication, and every other necessity an elderly woman needs to get by. So, what is it you're proposing? I asked, my voice still even. Clara and Mark exchanged a knowing look. In that single glance, I saw something that sent a chill down my spine, a cold deeper than the November air seeping through the window panes. They had rehearsed this. This was not a spontaneous argument fueled by financial pressure. This was a premeditated attack. We're proposing, Mark said with slow, deliberate emphasis, that you find a way to contribute significantly more, or you find somewhere else to live. At that moment, the television audience burst into thunderous applause. Someone on the screen had just won a prize, a wonderful and unexpected gift. The stark contrast between their joy and my reality felt like a deliberate twist of the knife. I looked at my daughter's face, searching for a glimmer of the young girl who used to run to me for comfort during thunderstorms. The woman staring back at me was a complete stranger. I see, I said, though I didn't truly see. Not yet. The full picture wouldn't become clear for a few more minutes, when Clara would shove 5 crumpled dollars into my hand and push me out into the biting cold. I wouldn't grasp the true depth of their cruelty until I was walking the streets of Westwood, replaying every sacrifice I'd ever made for her in my mind. For now, all I felt was a profound sense of exhaustion. I felt tired and utterly foolish for ever believing that family meant more than entries on a monthly expense sheet. Well? Clara pressed, her hands on her hips. What's your answer? The question hung in the air between us, as sharp and threatening as a guillotine's blade. Outside, the sky was darkening with clouds that promised the first deep cold of the season. Inside, an equally bitter chill was descending upon our small living room. The silence was thick and heavy, like a breath held for too long. Clara stood over me, demanding an answer I simply did not have. Mark remained by the sofa, his arms crossed over his chest, his face wearing the smug expression of a man who was certain he had already won. Finally, Clara made a sound of pure disgust. Fine. Just fine. She started for the kitchen, then whipped back around. But you are not going to sit around this house all day moping and feeling sorry for yourself. She vanished for a moment, and I heard the unmistakable sounds of her rummaging through her purse, the jingle of coins, the rustle of paper. She returned with a crumpled $5 bill clenched in her fist. Here, she said, thrusting the money at me as if it were contaminated. Take this $5 and go buy a lottery ticket. At least then you might be of some use to this family. The bill dangled between us, wrinkled and worn. $5. The apparent price of my utility. Go on, she snapped when I hesitated. Maybe you'll get lucky and fix all our problems. Mark let out a cynical chuckle from his spot by the couch. Yeah, because that's a foolproof plan. But a sharp glare from Clara was enough to cut his sarcasm short. This wasn't really about a lottery ticket, and all 3 of us knew it. This was their way of getting me out of the house. A maneuver to get rid of me, so they could freely discuss the next steps of their plan. I slowly reached out and took the $5 bill. The paper was soft and thin from being passed through countless hands. Someone else had worked for this money, spent it, received it as change. Now, it was being given to me as a gift wrapped in humiliation. Thank you, I said. Clara blinked, seemingly surprised. She had probably expected me to argue or protest. Well, good, she said, taking a step back, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. The corner store on Oak Avenue has those scratch-offs. Get one of the good ones, not those cheap dollar ones. I meticulously folded the bill and tucked it into my pocket. I will do that. Getting up from my chair required more effort than it should have. My knees ached in protest, stiff from sitting through the prolonged argument. How long had we been at this? An hour? Maybe more? The afternoon sun slanting through the windows had weakened, its light growing thin and pale. Where are you going? Mark asked as I headed for the front closet. To buy a lottery ticket, I replied simply. I took my coat from its hanger. The wool felt unusually heavy on my shoulders, or perhaps I just felt lighter, hollowed out by their words. Isn't that what you wanted? Clara watched me as I buttoned up my coat. You don't have to be so dramatic about it. We're not sending you to a firing squad. Of course not, I said, winding my scarf around my neck, deliberately taking my time. It's a lovely day for a walk. Through the window, the November sky looked like a heavy gray wool blanket pressing down on the world. Lovely was hardly the word for it, but then again, truth seemed to be a scarce commodity in this house. Mom, Clara's voice softened for a fraction of a second, with a note I couldn't quite decipher. Was it regret? Doubt? We're not. This isn't a personal attack. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. No, I'm sure it's not. It's just about being practical, Mark added from his position in the living room. We all have to be realistic. Realistic? Oh yes. I was beginning to see reality with perfect clarity. The reality of what my $150,000 had purchased. The reality of what family truly meant when finances became strained. I understand, I said, and I meant it more than they could possibly imagine. I pulled the front door open, and the crisp November air rushed in, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and the promise of snow. It was the smell of seasons changing, whether we were prepared for them or not. Get the $5 tickets, Clara called out as I stepped outside. They have better odds. Better odds. A small smile almost touched my lips. After today's events, I was starting to feel like I had a much better grasp on the concept of odds than ever before. I'll keep that in mind, I said. The door clicked shut behind me, silencing the drone of the television that had served as the soundtrack to my humiliation. The porch steps groaned under my feet, and then I was on the sidewalk, inhaling free air for the first time in what felt like an eternity. $5 in my pocket, $5 to purchase hope, to prove my usefulness, to solve all our problems. They had no inkling of how right they might turn out to be. But before anything else, I needed to walk. I needed to clear my head. I needed to trace back the steps that had led me to this moment, standing on a sidewalk with only $5 to my name and no place to truly call home. The convenience store on Oak Avenue was a 20-minute walk away. I had plenty of time to remember everything. Time to tally up every sacrifice, every broken promise, every act of kindness that had been repaid with contempt. Time to figure out my next move. The cold air on my face was like a bracing slap, a wake-up call. November in Ohio was no joke, and this felt like winter's opening salvo. I clutched my coat tighter and began to walk, putting Clara's house behind me. My feet fell into a familiar rhythm on the pavement. Left, right, left, right. It was the same steady pace I'd maintained walking to the Procter & Gamble plant every morning for 37 years. The same measured gait that had taken me through these neighborhood streets more times than I could count since I'd moved in with my daughter. Moved in. The phrase itself was a bitter irony, as if I had been given any other choice. The houses on Clara's street looked so warm and welcoming, with soft yellow light glowing in the windows as families began their Friday evening rituals. Through one window, I saw a mother helping her son with his schoolwork at the kitchen table. In another, a woman was setting out plates for dinner while her teenage daughter chatted on the phone. Normal families. Families that likely didn't assign a precise dollar amount to the worth of their elderly mothers. I turned onto Oak Avenue, passing the elementary school that Clara had once attended. The playground was filled with newer, more colorful equipment, all designed with safety in mind. It seemed everything had been upgraded over the years, except for the concept of family loyalty. The $5 bill in my pocket seemed to crinkle with every step. $5 for hope. $5 to be useful. I couldn't help but reflect on how this very amount of money once held such different meanings for us. When Clara was a little girl of 8, wanting an ice cream cone from the neighborhood truck, $5 was a treasure. When she was 16 and needed money for gas, $5 was the key to freedom. Now, it was a handout. No, it was worse than a handout. It was a dismissal. My breath plumed in small white clouds, as the temperature continued to fall. The gloomy weather mirrored my own spirit, gray and growing colder. Yet, the act of walking felt purposeful. It felt like I was moving forward, even if I wasn't entirely sure of my destination. 3 blocks from Clara's, I passed the corner where old Mrs. Gable used to live. She had passed away 2 years ago, and her house had been sold to a young couple with twin infants. Mrs. Gable had lived by herself after her husband died, much like I was living alone now. Despite being in a house full of people, the memory surfaced suddenly, sharp and clear. 3 years ago, I was standing in the kitchen of my own home on Maple Drive, the house I'd bought in 1983, where I had raised Clara, where my beloved Arthur and I had dreamed of spending our golden years together. The house had been fully paid off for 15 years by the time cancer took him from me. "Mom, you can't possibly stay in this big house all by yourself," Clara had said, her voice dripping with a concern I had foolishly believed to be real. "It's just not safe. What if you were to fall? What if something happened?" Mark had nodded in solemn agreement, perfectly playing the part of the devoted son-in-law. "We have that spare bedroom. You'd actually be doing us a huge favor. You could help out with the mortgage." Help with the mortgage. Even then, it was always about the money. The house is worth at least $180,000. The real estate agent had informed me. Maybe even more in this market. The location is ideal, and it's been beautifully maintained. $180,000. 34 years of mortgage payments, of constant upkeep, of pouring our hearts into improvements. 34 years of Arthur's vegetable garden, his meticulous care of the lawn, his dreams woven into the very fabric of that home. "We will take such good care of you, Mom," Clara had promised. "You will always have a home with us. Always. Always." What a hollow word. What a devastating lie. The house sold for $182,000. After the agent's fees and closing costs, I was left with $178,000. I set aside $28,000 for myself, a small nest egg for emergencies, medical expenses, or perhaps that trip to the Grand Canyon that Arthur had always wanted to take. The remaining $150,000 I gave to Clara and Mark as the down payment on the house where I was now. Nothing more than an unwelcome burden. "This is just so generous, Mom." Clara had actually shed tears when I gave her the check. "We will never ever forget this. Never." 3 years. It had taken them precisely 3 years for never to become never mind. I reached Crestview Park and paused by the entrance. A thin layer of ice was beginning to form on the pond, and the geese that usually gathered there had already departed for warmer climates. Smart birds. They knew when it was time to leave. $28,000. That was all I had left to show for a lifetime of hard work. $28,000. And a $1,200 a month pension that, according to my own daughter, wasn't enough to merit basic human decency. But it might be enough for something else. Something they would never see coming. I pulled the $5 bill from my pocket, examining it in the dimming afternoon light. It was such a small, insignificant thing to carry the weight of such a profound insult. But sometimes, the smallest things can trigger the most significant consequences. The convenience store was just 2 blocks ahead. I could see its neon sign flickering against the gray sky, a beacon of red and blue. Open 24 hours, a constant presence. I carefully folded the bill and returned it to my pocket. Then, I resumed walking, my steps now filled with a newfound purpose. I had a lottery ticket to purchase. I had a future to reclaim, and I had a plan to set in motion. The bright, sterile lights of the 7-Eleven were a shock after the gloom of the late afternoon. A bell chimed as I stepped inside, and for a moment, I was just another person going about a normal day. A young mother was trying to manage her coffee and keys, while her toddler pleaded for a candy bar. A pair of teenagers were loudly debating the merits of different energy drinks by the coolers. No one in this store was aware of the family meeting disguised as a financial ultimatum I had just endured. No one here had just been told to find another place to live. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Vance." Raj, the man behind the counter, greeted me with a genuine smile. He had been working here for a couple of years, and always made a point to be polite and remember his customers' names. "It's a cold one today, Raj," I replied, "and getting colder." I approached the counter, where the lottery tickets were displayed like a colorful shrine to impossible hopes. There were rows of scratch-off tickets and slips for Powerball and Mega Millions waiting to be printed. "Powerball drawing is tonight," I said. "Tuesday's the big one," Raj corrected me gently. $30 million jackpot. "Are you feeling lucky?" Lucky? That was an interesting choice of words. Was it luck that had brought me to this point? Was it luck that had led Clara to thrust $5 into my hand and send me on this demeaning errand? "One ticket for Clara Hargrove," I stated clearly, "and 2 tickets for Eleanor Vance." Raj's fingers danced across the lottery machine's keypad without a second thought. The machine whirred to life, printing out 3 slips of paper, each with its neat rows of numbers. Hope? Distilled down to a matter of mathematical probability. "Quick pick for all 3? He asked. "Yes, quick pick. Let the machine decide," I said. "Let fate choose the numbers that could potentially change everything." I took out my wallet, feeling the gravity of my decision. Clara's crumpled $5 bill went onto the counter first. Then, I added a crisp $10 bill from my own cash, money I had withdrawn from the bank just last week. $15 total, Raj said as he made my change. "Good luck to both of you." Both of us. If only he knew the full story. The machine completed its task with a final, mechanical whir. 3 tickets, all bearing the same drawing date, Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. Each ticket held the same astronomical odds, the same infinitesimal chance to turn an ordinary life into something extraordinary. I folded the tickets with care, ensuring the barcodes were not creased. Clara's ticket went into my shirt pocket, close to my heart, like a hidden vow. My 2 tickets were tucked safely into my wallet, nestled between a faded photograph of Arthur and my Medicare card. "The weather is supposed to get nasty later this week," Raj commented, counting out my change. "Snow by Thursday, maybe Friday." "That's all right," I said, the lie slipping out effortlessly. "I don't have anywhere important to be." But I did. I had the most important place to be on Tuesday night, sitting in that living room, watching Clara check the numbers on her ticket, watching her face as she processed what $30 million would mean, watching her dream of a future that would be free of the burden of her aging mother, a future that was never going to happen. The bell chimed again as I stepped back out into the November chill. The afternoon had darkened considerably while I was inside. The streetlights were beginning to flicker on, even though the sun had not yet fully set. November in Ohio was not a time for long days or gentle goodbyes. $5 of Clara's money had purchased her one shot at $30 million. $10 of my money had purchased me 2 shots at something far more precious: justice. The walk back to the house would take 20 minutes. 20 minutes to compose my expression, to practice looking like a woman who had simply followed orders. 20 minutes to slip back into the role of the dutiful mother, the grateful dependent who had used her daughter's charity to purchase a flimsy, impossible dream. I pulled my coat tighter and began to walk. Behind me, the 7-Eleven's neon sign hummed in the encroaching darkness, a beacon of hope, instant coffee, and cigarettes, all the little vices people turn to when they desperately need a change. I already had what I needed, tucked securely in my wallet. Change was on its way, whether they were ready for it or not. The tickets rustled softly against my chest with each step. 3 small pieces of paper poised to redefine our world. 3 chances for the universe to deliver the justice that 37 years of dedicated work and a $150,000 gift so richly deserved. Tuesday could not arrive soon enough. The front door lock gave way with its usual slight resistance. After 3 years of turning this key, it still felt like I was entering someone else's home, as if I needed permission to be there. The warmth of the house washed over me, along with the drone of the television and the aroma of whatever Clara was preparing for dinner. "Is that you, Mom?" Her voice floated from the kitchen, a mix of casualness and dismissal. "It's just me," I replied. I hung my coat in the closet, carefully placing it on a wooden hanger. The tickets in my pocket felt warm against my skin, 3 small rectangles of pure potential that I alone knew about. Mark glanced up from the couch as I walked into the living room. He had shifted his position since I'd left, but not by much. He was now sprawled out, a bag of chips resting on his stomach, his eyes fixed on some afternoon program. "Did you get a winner?" he asked, gesturing toward me with the remote. His tone was laced with mockery, making it clear he wasn't genuinely interested. I reached into my shirt pocket, pulled out the 3 tickets, and placed them on the coffee table with a practiced air of nonchalance. "Just a simple errand. Nothing to see here. Quick picks," I said. "The drawing is on Tuesday." Clara came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She glanced at the coffee table where the tickets lay, 3 unremarkable slips of white paper amidst the scattered mail and TV remotes. "Already planning how to spend your millions?" Her laugh was sharp and brittle. "Maybe you can buy us a new house, one with a furnace that actually works." The irony was so thick it was almost painful. She had no idea how close her sarcastic comment was to the truth. Mark picked up one of the tickets, giving it a cursory glance before tossing it back down. "Powerball, huh? What's the jackpot up to?" 30 million, I believe," I said quietly. 30 million. Clara shook her head as she walked to the window to draw the curtains. "Can you even imagine? $30 million, and all our problems would just disappear. No more bickering about grocery money. No more stressing over the heating bill." She pulled the heavy curtain shut, blocking out the last of the fading daylight. "Of course, with our luck, we'll probably match one number and win a free ticket for the next drawing." "Sounds about right," Mark mumbled, his focus already back on the TV. "The Vance family luck is about as thin as everything else in this house." I stood there, listening to them casually dismiss my tickets, our tickets with the absolute certainty of people who had never known true luck, good or bad. They saw 3 pieces of paper, a $15 investment in a fleeting fantasy. They were blind to the careful calculation, the strategic move, the justice that was patiently waiting to be served. "Well," Clara said, sinking into her armchair, "I guess it's nice to dream for a couple of days, even if it is just a fantasy." Fantasy? The words seemed to hang in the air between us. They were utterly oblivious to the fact that their fantasy was about to become my reality. "I think I'll go rest for a bit before dinner," I announced. "Sure thing," Clara said, waving the dish towel distractedly. "We're having the leftover casserole. I hope that's all right." Of course, it was all right. Everything was all right with me now. I was playing my part, the grateful dependent, the aging mother who humbly accepted whatever scraps of food or kindness were thrown her way, the woman who had sold her home and given away her future for the privilege of being merely tolerated in someone else's space. I climbed the stairs, each step slow and deliberate. Behind me, the television continued its mindless chatter, and I heard Mark make a comment about dinner that was met with a sharp retort from Clara. The ordinary sounds of a family. The normal frictions. Everything was perfectly normal for the last few days before normal ceased to exist forever. My room at the top of the stairs was small and neat, a temporary space. The bed was one I'd purchased myself, and the dresser had once been in the master bedroom of my house on Maple Drive. They were pieces of my former life, crammed into a room barely large enough to hold them. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my wallet. There they were, the 2 tickets, tucked between my Medicare card and a photo of Arthur. They had the same numbers, the same drawing date, the same impossible odds as the ticket downstairs. But these 2 belonged to me. These had my name printed on them in clear, black ink that could not be argued away. Tuesday night. 4 more days of playing the part of the grateful mother, the burden who contributed her small pension and bought lottery tickets with her daughter's pocket money. 4 more days of listening to their plans for a future that was built on the assumption that I would always be there, a small but necessary financial contributor. 4 more days until they would learn the true worth of Eleanor Vance. I placed the tickets back in my wallet and snapped it shut. Downstairs, I heard a clatter in the kitchen, followed by Clara calling out an order about setting the table. The sounds of domestic life, the sounds of a family completely unaware that their entire world was on the verge of being upended. From my window, I could just make out the 7-Eleven sign in the distance, a small, bright beacon in the deepening darkness. Raj would be starting his evening shift soon, taking inventory and selling small packets of hope to customers for pocket change. Hope? Yes, that's what I had bought today, but not the kind they imagined. I had bought the hope of justice, the hope of consequences, the hope that, after everything, a lifetime of sacrifice and kindness might finally be rewarded. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. The next 4 days trickled by like water slipping through my fingers. Saturday and Sunday blurred into Monday, a monotonous cycle of household routines and the usual undercurrent of tension. The lottery tickets lay on the coffee table, a forgotten detail among the stacks of bills, magazines, and Mark's empty beer bottles. I maintained my quiet presence, immersing myself in the newspaper and watching afternoon game shows. Occasionally, Clara would mention the tickets, always with a joke about how we were short a loose. Mark paid them no attention at all. His focus on the job applications he never seemed to get around to completing. Tuesday evening finally came, bringing with it a gray, biting cold that seemed to have settled deep into the Ohio soil. The lottery drawing was scheduled for 8:00 p.m., neatly tucked between the evening news and a sitcom rerun. We found ourselves in the living room, not by plan, but by the pull of habit. Might as well see how we lost, Clara said, reaching for the tickets on the coffee table. She scooped up all 3, holding them like a bad hand in a card game. What were the numbers again, Mom? I don't recall. I lied smoothly. I had committed every digit to memory days ago, knowing them better than my own address. That's why we have the tickets. The television host appeared on screen, a beacon of enthusiasm, standing beside the clear sphere filled with numbered balls. Good evening, and welcome to the Tuesday night Powerball. Tonight's jackpot is a sensational $30 million. $30 million? Mark actually sat up a little straighter on the couch. His interest peaked despite his efforts to appear indifferent. A lot of beer could be bought with $30 million, he muttered. Clara shushed him, her eyes squinting at the first ticket. Okay, here we go. Our one shot to join the ranks of the disgustingly rich. The sphere began to spin, the balls tumbling and dancing like frantic atoms. With a flourish, the host reached in and drew the first white ball. 7. Clara glanced down at the ticket. 7? Well, we have one. Don't get your hopes up, Mark warned. It's probably the only one we'll get. The second ball was drawn. 23. 23. Clara's voice held a new note of surprise. We have that one too. I sat perfectly still in my armchair, my hands folded in my lap, observing the scene like a director watching a play. The actors were clueless, completely unaware of their true roles in the unfolding drama. 31? Clara leaned forward, her voice rising. 31? That's 3 numbers. Wait, we actually have 3 numbers. Mark turned his full attention from the television, suddenly invested. Let me see that ticket. 42. 42. Clara was on her feet now, the ticket trembling in her hand. 4 numbers. We have 4 numbers. The host's voice boomed from the television, seeming to echo in the now charged atmosphere of the room. 58. A profound silence fell. Clara stared at the ticket, her lips moving silently as she checked and rechecked the numbers. Mark grabbed her wrist, pulling the ticket closer so he could see. 58, she whispered, her voice barely audible. We have 58. 5 numbers, Mark breathed, his voice filled with awe. 5 out of 6 numbers. And now, the host announced with practiced suspense, the Powerball. Tonight's Powerball number is 12. The moment seemed to stretch on for an eternity. Clara's eyes darted from the ticket to the television and back again. The color drained from her face, leaving it a stark, ghostly white. 12, she said, her voice a faint whisper. The Powerball is 12. Mark snatched the ticket from her grasp. His eyes scanned the numbers, his expression shifting from disbelief to wild, uncontainable excitement. Oh my God, he yelled. We won. We actually won. He leaped from the couch, the ticket clutched tightly in his fist. $30 million! We're millionaires. Clara collapsed back into her chair for a second, then shot up again as if the furniture were electrified. I can't believe it. I honestly cannot believe it. We won the lottery. They rushed into each other's arms, embracing with a passion I hadn't witnessed since their wedding. Mark lifted Clara and spun her around the coffee table as she laughed and sobbed all at once. $30 million, she chanted over and over. 30 million. We never have to worry about money again, Mark exclaimed, his voice thick with emotion. A new house, new cars. We can travel anywhere we want. We can pay off everything. We can buy everything. We can do anything. I watched their ecstatic celebration with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist studying a newly discovered tribe. Their joy was palpable, their excitement unfeigned. They were utterly convinced that their lives had been miraculously transformed from a daily struggle into a perpetual paradise. Can you even imagine? Clara finally turned to me, her face flushed with euphoria, trying to include me in their moment. Mom, can you possibly imagine $30 million? I gave a slow, deliberate nod. It is quite a significant sum. Significant? Mark laughed, a sound that bordered on hysterical. It's life-altering money. It's never worry about a single thing. Again, money. They danced around the living room like overjoyed children, already making extravagant plans and grand promises to one another. Clara chattered about a house in Florida she had always dreamed of owning. Mark talked about the boat he had coveted since he was in high school. In their delirium, neither of them spared a glance for the other 2 lottery tickets that still lay on the coffee table. Neither of them questioned why I remained so composed in the face of their astonishing luck. They were far too engrossed in their celebration to notice that the woman who had made it all possible was watching them with the quiet patience of someone who knew the real drama had yet to begin. Their jubilation hit a fever pitch. Clara grabbed Mark's hands, and they spun around the coffee table again, both of them shrieking with laughter like children who had just unearthed a pirate's treasure. The winning ticket, held tightly in her hand, fluttered like a small white flag of triumph. We're rich. We're actually unbelievably rich. Neil lifted her clean off her feet, twirling her around until she squealed with pure joy. $30 million. Can you believe this? I stayed in my armchair, a silent observer of their victory dance. They moved around me as if I were a piece of inanimate furniture, already a forgotten relic in their new, opulent world. The television continued its evening programming, but it was now just background noise. They had everything they needed. We can finally buy that house in Florida, Clara said, catching her breath as Mark set her down. The one with the swimming pool and the ocean view. Do you remember? We saw it online last year. And the boat? Mark added, his eyes gleaming with a raw, greedy light. That 30-foot cabin cruiser? We are going to live like royalty, Clara declared, clutching the ticket to her chest as if it were a sacred artifact. No more stressing about money. No more fighting over bills. No more. Her eyes landed on me, and her expression subtly changed. The unadulterated joy was still there, but a colder, more calculating look began to creep in as she assessed what this windfall meant for our current living situation. No more depending on anyone, she finished, her voice now quiet and measured. Mark's gaze followed hers to me. For a beat, the only sound in the living room was the drone of the television. Then, a cruel, triumphant smile spread across his face. That's right, he said, straightening his posture, seeming to grow taller before my eyes. We don't need your pathetic little pennies anymore, old woman. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. Pathetic pennies. 3 years of my pension. 3 years of my contributions to their groceries. 3 years of helping them stay afloat. All of it dismissed as pathetic pennies by a man who hadn't held a steady job in 2 years. Those pennies helped feed you, I stated calmly. Clara's eyes flashed with indignation. Fed us? Your $1,200 barely made a dent in the utilities. We have been carrying you for 3 years, Mom. 3 years of extra food to buy, extra heating costs, extra everything because you couldn't manage on your own. I sold my house for you, I reminded her. You sold your house because you couldn't keep it up. Mark snapped. Because you needed us to take you in. Well, guess what? We don't have to take care of anyone anymore. Clara waved the lottery ticket in the air like a magic wand. We're millionaires now. We can finally afford to live our own lives without having to support dead weight. Dead weight. After 37 years at the factory, after raising her as a single mother when Arthur passed away, after gifting them the bulk of my life savings, I had been reduced to dead weight. Pack your things. Mark continued, his voice swelling with a newfound arrogance. It's time for you to find another place to live. Mark? Clara's objection was feeble, almost inaudible. No, Clara, she heard what we talked about. We couldn't afford to have her here on her pension. Well, now we can afford not to have her here. Mark crossed his arms, looking immensely pleased with himself. $30 million means we get to decide who lives in our house. Our house? The house they had purchased with my $150,000 had become exclusively their house the instant they thought they were rich. You want me to leave tonight? I asked, my voice steady. Tonight? Tomorrow, whatever? Mark shrugged dismissively. The point is, you need to be gone. We have a new life to start planning. And frankly, it doesn't involve babysitting our elderly relatives. Clara clutched the ticket tighter. Mom, you have to see that this changes everything. We can afford to help you find a nice assisted living facility now. Somewhere with people your own age. Assisted living. The final, thinly veiled insult. They wanted to shuttle me off to a warehouse for other discarded parents, other inconvenient family members whose children had found better things to do with their time and money. I understand perfectly, I said, slowly rising from my chair. The simple act of standing seemed to take them by surprise. Perhaps they had anticipated tears, pleading, or desperate promises to be less of a burden. Instead, I stood before them with the same quiet dignity I had carried for 68 years, the same inner strength that had seen them through every crisis they had ever faced. You understand? Clara blinked, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. I understand that $30 million has revealed exactly who you both truly are. Mark's face turned a deep shade of red. Don't you dare try to guilt trip us, old woman. We don't owe you a thing. No, I agreed softly. You don't. I walked toward the staircase, each step measured and firm. Behind me, I could hear Clara whisper something to Mark, but I couldn't discern the words. It didn't matter. Everything that needed to be said had already been spoken loud and clear. At the foot of the stairs, I paused and looked back at them. They stood together in their living room, surrounded by the remnants of their old life and the promise of their new one, holding their lottery ticket like a weapon they had just used to sever me from their lives. They had no idea that the weapon was, in fact, mine. The stairs groaned under my feet, each sound marking my retreat from their premature celebration and my ascent to the small room that had been my prison for 3 years. Behind me, their excited voices rose once more, already making plans for trips and purchases that would never materialize. My bedroom was dark and silent. I switched on the overhead light, revealing the room in all its stark simplicity. A single bed covered with a quilt my mother-in-law had made decades ago, a dresser that had once graced the master bedroom on Maple Drive, and a small television that struggled to pick up local channels. This tiny room had been the home of a woman worth $30 million, and they had treated her like a charity case. I retrieved my old suitcase from the back of the closet, the same one Arthur and I had taken on our honeymoon 43 years ago. The zipper was still functional, though the corners were scuffed and worn from a lifetime of modest trips, bus rides to visit relatives, weekend escapes to Lake Erie when our budget allowed. Packing became a methodical, rhythmic process. I folded my shirts neatly, arranged my pants to avoid creasing, and packed 3 days' worth of undergarments and socks. My diabetes medication, my blood pressure pills, the little plastic organizer that kept my daily regimen straight, it all went in. The framed photograph of Arthur was the first thing I packed, carefully wrapping it in a soft undershirt for safekeeping. 41 years of marriage, condensed into a 4x6-inch frame, but it held more love than this entire house had shown me in 3 years. My important documents were in a manila envelope, my social security card, Medicare information, and bank statements showing my humble balance of $28,000. It wasn't enough for a lavish retirement, but it was more than enough for what I was about to do. From downstairs, I heard the sound of a cabinet door banging shut, followed by Clara's excited voice. "Where did we put that bottle of champagne we got last Christmas?" They were celebrating. Of course they were. They believed they had won not just a fortune, but their freedom from me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my wallet in my hands. Inside, nestled between my driver's license and Medicare card, 2 lottery tickets lay in wait. They bore the same winning numbers as the one they were celebrating downstairs, the same drawing date, the same $30 million prize, but they had a different name printed on them. I had worked for 42 years in that factory, breathing in chemical fumes and the smell of machine oil, watching as younger men were promoted over me while I remained a steady, reliable presence on the assembly line. 42 years of taking every overtime shift offered to pay for Clara's school clothes, for Arthur's medical treatments, for the endless small expenses that come with raising a family with care and dedication. I never missed a day of work unless I was genuinely ill. I never called in sick because I felt like going fishing, had a hangover, or simply didn't want to go. When a foreman needed a volunteer for a Saturday shift, Eleanor Vance raised her hand. When they needed someone to train the new hires, Eleanor Vance stayed late without asking for extra pay. I was steady, reliable, and ultimately, forgettable. The house on Maple Drive was the reward for all those years of toil. We had paid it off ahead of schedule through meticulous budgeting and countless small sacrifices. It was meant to be our security, Arthur's and mine. After he passed, it became my sanctuary, a place filled with his memory, where his presence still lingered in every corner. I had given it all up for family, for blood, for the promise that I would always have a home with the people who were supposed to love me. Downstairs, Mark's voice boomed. "First thing in the morning, we're calling a travel agent. I want to see Paris, Rome, all those places we never dreamed we could afford." They were planning to see the world with my money, while I was destined for some sterile assisted living facility, where I would spend my remaining social security on basic cable and bland cafeteria food. I closed the suitcase, the sound of the zipper echoing with finality. The life of the grateful, dependent Eleanor Vance was officially over. The next chapter would be something entirely different. I packed a second, smaller bag with my toiletries, and a change of clothes. Everything else, the furniture I had purchased, the reading lamp that had been Arthur's favorite, the books I had collected over 3 years of lonely evenings, I would leave behind. Material possessions meant nothing to me now. Justice meant everything. The stairs creaked again as I made my descent, carrying my 2 small bags. The celebration in the living room had become louder, more boisterous. Someone had clearly found the champagne. I reached the front hallway and placed my bags by the door, the same door I had walked through 3 years ago, filled with hope and gratitude for my daughter's supposed kindness. Tonight, I would walk through it carrying something far more valuable: the truth. Clara was standing in the hallway when I reached the bottom of the stairs. She had a glass of champagne in one hand and the lottery ticket in the other. She had clearly been waiting for me, likely to make sure I was actually leaving. Her face was flushed from the alcohol and the excitement, and her smile was sharp with victory. "Well, Mom," she said, waving the ticket like a trophy, "I suppose this is it. Don't look so glum. This is for the best, for all of us. You'll be much happier in a place that's more appropriate for your age." She held the ticket up, admiring it in the light. Our golden ticket. $30 million of pure, unadulterated freedom. I set my bags down and studied her face. In all of their frantic celebration and cruel dismissals, it was clear she had never truly looked at the object in her hand. She had matched the numbers on the screen, rejoiced in the win, but had failed to examine the ticket itself. "Clara," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "have you actually read the name that is printed on that lottery ticket?" Her triumphant smile wavered. "What are you talking about? It's our ticket. We bought it with our money." "You bought it with $5, I corrected her. "But whose name did you instruct the clerk to print on it?" A flicker of confusion crossed her face, followed by the first shadow of unease. She lowered the ticket and, for the first time since the numbers were drawn, she looked at it closely. The blood drained from her face, leaving it ashen. Eleanor Vance, she read aloud, her voice a strangled whisper. This says Eleanor Vance. That's correct. She stared at the ticket, then at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. This can't be right. There has to be a mistake. There is no mistake. That ticket is mine. But I gave you the $5. You bought this for us. You gave me $5 to buy a ticket? I clarified. I bought 3 tickets. 1 for you, with your money, registered in your name, and 2 for me, with my money, registered in my name. I held out my hand. The ticket you are holding belongs to me. Mark appeared in the hallway, drawn by the sudden shift in Clara's tone. What's going on? Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? With a trembling hand, Clara held up the ticket. Mark, look at this. Look at the name. He squinted at the fine print, his champagne-addled mind struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. Eleanor Vance, so what? The old woman bought it for us. No, I said calmly. I bought it for myself, with my own money, and registered it in my name, which makes it legally and unequivocally mine. The hallway was suddenly silent, save for the sound of the television still playing in the now empty living room. I watched as the reality of the situation slowly dawned on their faces, like a dark cloud eclipsing the Sunday. You can't, Clara's voice cracked. This is ours. We won. We were celebrating. You were celebrating a win that was never yours to claim. Mark stepped forward, his face contorting with rage. You used the money we gave you to buy that ticket. I bought 3 tickets, I repeated patiently. Yours is likely still on the coffee table where I left it, with your name and a set of losing numbers on it. This is some kind of sick joke, Clara whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. I gently reached out and took the ticket from her now. Limp fingers. She didn't put up a fight. The paper was still warm from her hand, slightly damp from her champagne-fueled celebration. $30 million? I said, looking at the numbers that were a perfect match for the Tuesday night drawing. That is quite a significant sum, as you said. Enough to buy a very nice house somewhere warm, enough to travel the world, enough to live the rest of my life in comfort. Mom, wait. Clara's voice was now desperate, pleading. We can figure this out. We're family. We can split it. Split it? I carefully folded the ticket and placed it in my wallet, alongside the 2 identical tickets that were my insurance. The way we've been splitting the household expenses? The way you just shared your true feelings about supporting your deadweight mother? Mark's face had transitioned from red to a deep, alarming shade of purple. You planned this. You set us up. I bought lottery tickets with my own money, just as millions of other people do every week. I said, the fact that I happened to win is just. I allowed myself a small, genuine smile, the first I had felt in 3 long years. Lucky. Mark's heavy footsteps pounded down the stairs, and he appeared in the hallway, his face a mask of purple rage. The smell of champagne preceded him like a foul warning. What the hell is happening? He demanded, his eyes darting between Clara's horrified expression and my calm resolve. Why does she look like someone just died? Clara's hand trembled as she pointed at the ticket now in my possession. Mark, the ticket. It has her name on it. Not ours. Hers. For a second, Mark's alcohol-soaked brain couldn't compute the information. Then, his eyes locked onto the lottery ticket in my hands with a predatory focus. You give that back right now. He took a menacing step toward me, his large frame seeming to swallow up the narrow hallway. That ticket belongs to us. We were planning our entire future around that money. The ticket belongs to the person whose name is printed on it, I stated calmly. Ohio state law is very clear on that point. I don't give a damn what the law says. Mark's voice escalated into a near hysterical shriek. You bought that with our money, in our house, for our family. I bought 3 tickets, I reiterated. Yours is still on the coffee table, with its losing numbers. Mark's hands balled into tight fists. Give me that ticket, old woman, or I swear you will regret it. I took a small step back, never breaking eye contact. If you take one more step toward me, I will call the police and report you for assault and attempted theft. The words halted him as effectively as a physical wall. His fists remained clenched, but he was frozen in place. Even through his drunken rage, he understood the gravity of my threat. "You can't do this to us," Clara whispered, tears now streaming down her face. "We're family. We've been taking care of you for 3 years." "Taking care of me?" I tucked my wallet securely into my purse. "You just finished informing me that I was dead weight you couldn't wait to be rid of." "We didn't mean it," she pleaded. "We were just so excited about the money. We weren't thinking straight." "Oh no, my dear daughter. For the first time in 3 years, you were thinking with absolute clarity. You showed me exactly what I am worth to you the moment you thought you had the power to cast me aside." Mark shifted, attempting to block my path to the door. "You are not leaving this house with that ticket. We'll call the police ourselves. We'll tell them you stole it from us." "Please, do," I said, reaching for my suitcase. "I would be more than happy to show them my receipt from the 7-Eleven, and I'm sure the security camera footage of me purchasing 3 separate tickets with my own money will be very illuminating. I would also relish the opportunity to explain to them how you attempted to physically intimidate a senior citizen into surrendering her legally owned property." The color drained from Mark's face. Even in his inebriated state, he could see the disastrous end to that scenario. "Mom, please," Clara's voice broke. "We can work this out. We can share the money. You can live here for as long as you want. We will never bring up money again." "Share?" I picked up my second bag. "The way we've shared this house? The way we've shared the bills? The way you so honestly shared your feelings about supporting your aging mother?" "We made a mistake," Mark said, his aggression collapsing into a pathetic desperation. "People say things they don't mean when they're excited." "No, Mark," I corrected him. "People say what they truly think when they finally feel safe enough to be honest. Tonight, you both felt safe enough to reveal your true selves to me." I moved toward the door, and this time, Mark stepped aside. All the fight had gone out of him, replaced by a hollow sense of defeat. "Where will you go?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Somewhere I'm wanted," I replied, pulling the front door open and letting the cold November air swirl around us. "Somewhere I am valued for who I am, not for my monthly pension check." "You're making a terrible mistake," Mark said, but his words were empty, devoid of conviction. "No, my mistake was made 3 years ago, when I convinced myself that family meant something more than financial convenience." I stepped out onto the porch, my suitcases in hand. "Tonight, I am correcting that mistake." The porch light threw long dark shadows across the lawn. Behind me, I could hear Clara sobbing and Mark muttering curses under his breath. Ahead of me lay the cold, crisp November night, and whatever future $30 million could provide. I walked down the driveway, without a single glance back. Their voices quickly faded, swallowed by the darkness that had always felt more honest and welcoming than their false warmth. For the first time in 3 years, I was truly free. The Motel 6 on Route 50 became my refuge that first night. The room had the faint, antiseptic smell of industrial cleaner and old carpet, but it gave me something Clara's house never could. Honest hospitality, paid for with my own money. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, examining the winning ticket, under the unforgiving glare of the fluorescent light. 7/23/31, 42, 58, and the Powerball, 12. These numbers were about to transform my remaining years from a burden into a blessing. The next morning was all about practicalities. The Ohio Lottery headquarters in Columbus opened at 9:00 a.m. By 8:30, I was dressed in my best blouse and jacket, the tickets secured in my wallet, along with every piece of identification I owned. The lottery building was a place of quiet, bureaucratic efficiency, filled with security guards and government workers who processed dreams for a living. My claims agent, a pleasant woman named Diane, treated me with a level of professional respect that felt almost foreign after 3 years of being treated like a child. "Congratulations, Mrs. Vance," she said, examining my ticket under a special light, verifying watermarks and security codes. Everything appears to be in perfect order. We'll just need to confirm your identity and go over your payment options. How long does the entire process take? I asked. Usually 2 to 3 weeks for the full verification and processing, she explained. You'll have a choice between a lump sum payment, which after taxes will be approximately $18 million, or an annuity paid out over 30 years. $18 million. It was more money than 3 generations of my family had earned in their lifetimes combined. The lump sum? I said without a moment's hesitation. A smart decision for someone your age. She nodded. We can also discuss your options for anonymity. Ohio law permits winners to remain private if they choose. Private? Yes. That was exactly what I wanted. My phone rang incessantly during those first few days. Clara's number flashed on the screen dozens of times, followed by Mark's. I let every call go straight to voicemail, and eventually blocked both of their numbers. The messages they left became increasingly unhinged. Clara's tearful apologies were interwoven with manipulative guilt trips. Mark's initial threats slowly devolved into desperate pleading. By the second week, they had even started getting their neighbors to call me, people who had no idea what had truly transpired. That Tuesday night, I went out and got a new phone number. The motel became my temporary headquarters, room 127, with its 2 double beds and a small television with basic cable, cost $69 a night. For the first time in years, I had the means to afford anything I desired, yet I found comfort in simplicity. My days consisted of simple meals from nearby diners, watching old movies on TV, and taking long solitary walks around Westwood as I meticulously planned my new life. December brought the first significant snowfall of the season. From my motel room window, I watched the other guests come and go. Traveling salespeople, construction crews, families between homes, all of us living temporary lives, all searching for a permanent solution. The call from the lottery office came on December 10th. Mrs. Vance, your funds are ready for transfer. If you could come in tomorrow to sign the final paperwork, we can complete the transaction. Of course, I replied. That night, I stayed up late, researching real estate online. Indian Hill, an affluent suburb of Cincinnati, immediately captured my attention. It was known for its quiet, tree-lined streets, elegant homes, and proximity to the city, a place where a retired lottery winner could live in comfort and privacy, without drawing undue attention. Diane handed me the final check on Thursday, December 12th. $18,200,000 after taxes. It was enough to buy security, comfort, and, most importantly, my independence. Do you have any plans for the money? She asked with a polite smile. I plan on living well, I replied. Finally living well. That afternoon, the check was deposited into my newly opened bank account. The bank manager, a Mr. Caldwell, treated me with the kind of deference reserved for their most important clients. There were no prying questions about my past, no judgments about my modest attire, just professional, courteous service for a valued customer. The following week was a blur of real estate appointments. Indian Hill had many beautiful homes to offer, not gaudy mansions, but substantial, tasteful houses with character and privacy. They were places where Eleanor Vance could be whomever she wanted to be. I found the one on December 18th. It was a villa-style home with views of the lake, mature trees, and enough space for a woman to finally have room to think. The owner accepted my cash offer without hesitation, and the closing was set for January 3rd. New Year's Eve found me in the same motel room, watching the celebrations on television as a gentle snow fell outside my window. Across the country, people were celebrating the end of another year. I was celebrating the beginning of my real life. At 68 years old, I was finally ready to live for myself. The January sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new living room, casting a warm golden light on the hardwood floors that were mine and mine alone. The moving truck had left 2 hours earlier, leaving behind beautiful furniture I had selected for comfort, not for its price tag, all arranged in rooms that were spacious and airy. Indian Hill was a perfect fit. My neighbors offered polite nods and smiles during my morning walks, respecting the quiet privacy that wealth afforded. No one here knew about my meager pension checks, my strained family obligations, or the lottery ticket that had changed my destiny. Here, I was simply Mrs. Vance, the quiet woman who lived in the lovely villa with the lake view. The kitchen was a marvel, filled with gleaming appliances I had only ever seen in magazines. This morning, I had brewed a cup of fresh coffee in a machine that cost more than my entire grocery budget for a month had been. The irony was not lost on me. Now that I finally had the money to eat whatever I wanted, my appetite, which had been dormant for years, had returned with a vengeance. My new phone sat on the granite countertop, blissfully silent. It had been 3 months since I changed my number, and the peace was profound. There were no desperate voicemails, no guilt-ridden text messages, no manufactured family emergencies demanding my financial help. The sound of peace, I had discovered, was silence. Mrs. Gable from next door had stopped by the day before, with a plate of homemade cookies, a simple, genuine gesture of welcome. She told me her husband ran a medical practice in the city, and that they had lived in the neighborhood for 23 years. Good people here, she had said. People who value their privacy and respect boundaries. Respect. It was a wonderful concept. The master bedroom looked out over Lake Michigan, the winter ice stretching to the horizon like a vast, unbroken promise. Arthur's photograph had pride of place on my nightstand. For the first time since he died, I could look at his smiling face without a pang of guilt over my own diminished circumstances. He would have adored this house, this view, this incredible freedom to simply choose how we would spend our days. Finally living for myself, I said aloud, the words sounding strange and wonderful in the quiet room. They sounded true. My financial advisor had created a portfolio of conservative, diversified investments that would preserve my wealth for the rest of my life, ensuring a steady income to maintain this lifestyle indefinitely. At 68, I had plenty of time to enjoy what I had earned through 47 years of hard labor and 3 years of profound humiliation. Travel brochures were spread across my dining room table. Europe in the spring, perhaps Australia during their autumn. These were the places Arthur and I had dreamed of visiting during all those years at the factory, when any overtime pay we earned forced a choice between our vacation fund and Clara's needs. Now, I could go anywhere, do anything, be anyone I wished. The doorbell chimed, a pleasant, melodic sound that interrupted my planning. The security monitor showed a delivery truck and a driver holding a large box. Mrs. Vance? Furniture delivery from Restoration Hardware. It was the set of dining room chairs I had ordered the week before. They were handcrafted, solid pieces of furniture that would last a lifetime, a stark contrast to the second-hand items that had populated my previous existence. Just set them inside the foyer. Thank you, I said, signing the electronic pad he offered. I'll take care of them later. The driver smiled. It's a beautiful home, ma'am. You chose a wonderful neighborhood. Yes, I agreed, a smile touching my own lips. I certainly did. After he had gone, I took another slow walk through my new home, still marveling at the details. The elegant crown molding, the gleaming floors, the large windows that opened to catch the breeze off the lake. The rooms were large enough to entertain guests, though I had no plans to host anyone from my former life. This house was more than a symbol of wealth. It was a symbol of choice. The choice to live with dignity, to spend my money as I saw fit without needing to justify it to anyone, to plan a future that revolved entirely around my own needs and desires. Justice had arrived in a most unexpected way. It wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. Their greed had cost them the very thing they thought they had won. My dignity had earned me everything they had tried to take for themselves. The afternoon light shifted, painting long, geometric patterns on walls that would never again hear complaints about my pension or criticisms of my contributions. These walls would only ever know peace. I settled into my new, comfortable leather armchair, opened a travel guide to Europe, and began to plan my spring in Tuscany. At 68 years old, my life was just beginning.